So this question says, what are the important things we should note or always consider when conducting or writing project reports in the postgraduate level? So I think there's probably a couple of things, and I'll just run through them. And this question obviously came up in a recent webinar, and I go through all the questions that we receive on the webinars, and I answer them in these videos afterwards. So the important thing to consider when conducting or writing a project or report in a postgraduate level is, firstly, who is your reader? So you must write for your reader. So for a thesis or a final report or a dissertation, as it might be called, your reader is the examiner. So you're writing to pass your degree. If you're writing a report during your degree, most probably you're writing for your supervisor. If you are writing for a journal, for example, and you're trying to get an article published, then you're writing for the editor of that journal and then ultimately the readers of that journal if it gets successfully published. So think about the reader is very important. And then second of all, think about the goals of that writing project. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? If it's a thesis, dissertation, the goal is to pass, and there's a very specific structure that you need to follow, and very specific sections within which you need to write. And there are goals and outcomes for each of those sections, and I teach that in my course, how to write and pass your final report, thesis, or dissertation. If it's an update on your project or your research, maybe it's a little less formal. Maybe the goals are for you to decide. Maybe you must state the goals up front, and then the writing throughout that document reinforces and leads towards achieving the goals of that writing. So be very clear on the goals and objectives of the writing, and then every sentence, every paragraph, every section you check is aligned to meeting and achieving the goals of that writing project, whatever it might be. And then I think the third and the last major topic that I would add in here as a consideration for when you're conducting a writing project is to write well. And if you don't write well, then no matter what the goals are or who the reader is and how you try and take those considerations into account, you're just simply not going to get your message across. So writing well is about making sure that you construct sentences very well, that your sentences are not too long, that your paragraphs have a unifying thought, a beginning sentence and a closing sentence, and that sections are composed of these well-formulated paragraphs with a proper thought process that comes across quite clearly in each of them, and that within those paragraphs you have sentences that are not laborious for people to read, and they take the reader on a very clear and specific journey of topics and arguments that need to be communicated. Now, there are two specific techniques that I teach in my course on how to double your writing quality that help you write better sentences. The first one is complexity last, and then the other one is old before new. And what this basically is saying, if you take old before new, you should put concepts and topics at the beginning of the sentences that your reader is already familiar with. So old at the beginning, before new topics, new ideas, new concepts that you want your reader to start to learn from your writing. And complexity last is similar. Put the simpler, easier concepts and topics at the beginning of the sentence, and then complexity last, the complex, the difficult topics towards the end of the sentence. And really what this is doing is saying, well, as a reader, I understand that the more that you have to keep in your mind as you're reading through my sentence, the harder it's going to be for you to get through my writing. And if I'm introducing subjects that you're familiar with at the beginning of the sentence, then you don't have to keep too much in your subconscious as you're going through my sentence. But if I'm bombarding you with very complex new topics at the beginning of every sentence, then it's going to get very exhausting for you as a reader. So these are just two principles and techniques that you can use to construct better sentences. So hopefully those are useful considerations for when writing at a postgraduate level.